My name is Thomas George Lazar. Tehohåhake, 2 roads. I come from a family of Mohawk chiefs, peacemakers and peacekeepers, warriors and man-eaters, lacrosse magicians, tobacco salesmen, gangsters, shamans, shit disturbers, and survivors. But instead of growing up around these heroes, I grew up on the East Mountain of Hamilton, where a whole other tribe of madness prevailed. I'm a living, breathing lie. A married man's mistake and a young girl's only chance to hop a fence out of town and escape to freedom. The truth robbed me of my golden heart. The lights are low, did you leave town? Can I come by, can we get low down? I always know the truth, but for you I'd lie. I can't own you, but I'd love to try. How does it feel to be lying by yourself? You're out or you're deal. Tell me, how does it feel? The truth is a constant seeker, a warrior with the tenacity of a traveling salesman, knocking on every door, looking to make its heavy-hearted delivery to exactly the right person. When I was small, the truth was whispered around my kitchen table as I peered out between the bars of my wooden playpen, staring at the shadows of my ancestors, sitting there in the dull glare of Bakelite lamps. The truth disguised itself to me. Sometimes I'd imagine it was an alien landing saucers in my backyard outside my bedroom window. And once, after I got my tonsils out, the truth appeared to me in chloroform hallucinations. Druggy, dreamy, lost information that bobbed and weaved and staggered its way to my bedside, like a drunken father on his way home from the bars. Let me put some sugar where they put salt. The mistakes you made aren't all your fault. Let me seal your scars and ease your mind. Turn your deep blue heart into the loving kind. How does it feel to be lying by yourself? You're out or you're deal. Tell me, how does it feel? For years, the truth strangled me with its unknown details, made me question myself constantly, attempted to shut out love, drove me to countless attempts also of self-destruction. The truth left me paralyzed, gasping for breath, struggling to free my voice from deep inside my guts in the middle of the night while I was sleeping. And I tricked myself into believing that I hunted down the truth. But the truth found me. And it wasn't the harmless, lily white, correct thing to do that we're all taught in school. And there's no immediate rewards from it. Truth is nothing but a bastard like me. You've been crying about the same thing every night. Are you out of love? Have you lost your fight? There's no easy way to pick up the slack. You're too young to lose and too old to go back. How does it feel to be lying by yourself? You're out or you deal. Tell me, how does it feel? Thank you very much. I sure love that you're all here. I often expect to show up to nobody, and the fact that you are somebody, fucking right, man. I got this prescription. I got a cataract, and the doctor gave me this new prescription, and these are the only lenses where I can actually see your beautiful faces. So I'm definitely not trying to be cool. I haven't been cool in my life yet. So it's, at 65, I don't expect to start now. 65. 12 years ago, at the age of 53, I was going out on a speaking tour out west. And they give you a handler. When people are spending a bunch of money, they want to make sure, especially when they take a look at me, that I'm going to show up. And so the handler pulls up in front of a limousine, and I go out to the car, and I get in the back seat. We're going to Pearson Airport. The woman inside, who was the handler, says, "Oh, I'm so excited. This is going to be so great. We're going to Regina and Winnipeg." And I thought, well, that's great. She goes, "And you don't know this, but my family and your family used to be friends." And I said, "You know what? I hear that a lot because of my last name, Wilson, but Bunny and George Wilson were really old. In fact, suspiciously too old to have had any children, my age anyway. George Wilson was a tail gunner in a Lancaster bomber. And for any of you that don't know what that means, the tail gunner position in Lancaster and Halifax bombers was known as the suicide seat. The young men, boys really, that sat in that seat, most of them didn't come home. George Wilson did come home with a massive head injury, a steel plate in his head, totally blind. He was jumping off the horse that was morphine from the war that turned into a dependency on alcohol. The home was really dark. They didn't have any friends. The only people that were allowed in the house were relatives that would come down from Quebec and from Ganawage, the Mohawk territory outside Montreal. The only people that ever were allowed in. Nobody in Hamilton. And I explained that to her, and she goes, "Oh no, my grandmother was friends with Bunny Wilson." And she knew Bunny Wilson's name too, which was kind of weird. She used to hang out with Bunny Wilson. Her name was Mary Brennan, and that name traveled to me over oceans of time. I hadn't heard that name, Mary Brennan, since I was about 4 years old. My heart cracked open because I didn't think that Bunny Wilson had any friends in Hamilton, and here she has this friend. I'm delighted, in fact, for the moment. And she goes, "Yes, Mary Brennan. In fact, my grandmother was so close with Bunny Wilson that she was there the day you were adopted." And I said, "What?" That started a journey that's been going on for the last 12 years. The greatest journey of my life, I have to say. But right after that confrontation, that moment, that little speaking tour, I flew back home, and I was scheduled to be on a CBC program called Definitely Not the Opera, which some of you might know. It's kind of a storyteller, cutesy little Saturday afternoon storyteller show. And I go into the CBC studios on Front Street in Toronto. I go up in the elevators, and I'm sitting behind the microphone in the studio. And the interviewer says, they don't tell you what you have to speak about, by the way. Interviewer says, "Good afternoon, welcome to Definitely Not the Opera on CBC. My name is Suki and Lee. Our guest today is Tom Wilson. And Tom, your subject that you have to talk about is you meet a complete stranger and they change your life." So I start telling this story in great detail. I tell this story on CBC radio to millions of, wait, it says CBC, hundreds of people. I can't believe that I've told this family secret. This has been information. My identity has been kept secret by my entire family, by everybody around me. And I told this secret on CBC radio. I finished the interview. I go out in front of CBC. I'm sitting beside Glenn Gould on that bench on Front Street, and I can't breathe. I'm having an anxiety attack. And I gather myself and I get on the bus, go back to Hamilton. And about 5 days later, I get a phone call. Ring, ring, ring. Hello. "Hi, is this Tom Wilson?" "Yes, it is." My name is Scott Sellers from Penguin Random House Book. I heard you on CBC Radio. Have you ever thought about writing a book, Tom? And I said, fuck no, that sounds like way too much work. And he said, well, will you come in for an interview? And I said, I'm a musician. I don't do anything all day. Of course I'll come in for an interview with you guys. When you want me to come, they want me to come, I come in. I got my big parka on because it's the beginning of winter and I'm cold. And I get up to this Penguin Random House offices and all this beautiful glass and Penguin classics on one wall and the receptionist there. And I said, she said, before I even get to say anything, she says, Mr. Wilson, everyone's waiting for you down in the boardroom. And I think, yes, everyone's waiting for me in the boardroom. So I go down, she leads me to the boardroom, and I'm sitting in this boardroom table, giant boardroom table, almost the length of between these pillars. And there are all these really well-dressed people who can read. It's like amazing because I'm from like a working class neighborhood in Hamilton. These people, they're never there. And I sit down, there's a pyramid of donuts and a carafe of coffee, and I've got my park on. It's 10 o'clock in the morning, and I'm sitting there, and I'm drinking the coffee, and I'm eating the donuts, and I'm getting sweatier and puffier, and the sugar and the caffeine is kicked in, and I'm becoming more erratic, and my arms are waving around, and I'm talking and talking and talking, and all of a sudden, it's 12 noon. I've been talking to these people for 2 hours straight, and I stop, and they say, well, we've never met anybody like you before. We would like you to come and write a book for Penguin Random House Books. So I would like to introduce myself at this time as Tom Wilson, author. Thank you. I wrote this book, Beautiful Scars, and I gave it everything I had. I originally went in with my editor, Martha Kenya Forser, who, if you read any Canadian books from Michael Ondaatje to Margaret Atwood, she is the editor or one of the editors on all these books. She's kind of like the Wayne Gretzky of the literary world in Canada. And I've got her as an editor, but I don't know that. So I said, yeah, this is going to be great. We're going to write this book. You know what? I'll come in, you run a tape recorder, and we'll do like 5 or 6 interviews, and then, you know, you take that away and, you know, make a book. She goes, no, I'm not going to do that. She goes, you actually have to write the book. I said, okay. So I'll go home, I'll get a tape recorder out, I'll talk into the tape recorder, I'll email it to you, and then you can write the whole thing out. She goes, no, Tom, you actually have to sit and write the book. And I think, oh, shit, this is actually really going to be hard, isn't it? So I actually managed to write the book. I found that writing the book was, well, first of all, writing the book saved me hundreds of thousands of dollars in therapy. But when I sat down to write, my heart was black. Black because I'd been lied to my entire life. Black because I had no identity. I didn't know my identity until then. I didn't know that I had been adopted. So I sat down and wrote, and as I was writing about Bunny and George Wilson, I was writing about the tenderness that they brought me in my life. And the fact that even at the end of the book, I say, you got to have people that give you a fighting chance. And these people, they didn't have anything. They didn't have any money. They didn't have any influence, nothing. But they gave what they had to me. All that blackness started to disappear. And I started to think about Bunny and George the same way. You know, when we're really young and we realize that our parents are going to die, I had that kind of feeling inside me, that kind of warmth and that kind of tenderness for them. And that was great. I wrote that book. And then the book went out and it became a bestseller, which was great. And in Canada, a bestseller, I think, is 7 or 8 books. I'm not sure. And then it turned into a documentary, a movie. So if you don't feel like reading it, you can just watch the movie. And now it's a stage play. And now it's part of the long story that I'm continuing with the second book for Penguin Random House at this time, that they actually, my editor wanted 2.5 years ago. So I'll get around to that. After I wrote the book, I started going out on literary tours, and then I thought, just like pop staples, you know the staple singers? Staple singers were like a religious singing group, right? And the sisters used to say, how come we're going to bars to go and do, and spread the name of the Lord? And he says, because that's where people need to hear about it. That's where people need the message. That's where people need to see us. So they ended up in bars and on the Flip Wilson show and at Wattstacks. And everybody knows the staple singers, right? Well, that's what I decided to do. I decided to take my book and I decided to go everywhere, telling this story, playing music. And I started getting asked, not with any kind of aggression, but just with more, some kind of sweet ignorance. So Tom, how does it feel to be an Indian? And I thought to myself, I don't know. I have no idea what it feels like to be a Mohawk. In fact, it was only through an odd occurrence that I found out that I was a Mohawk. I was driving my cousin Janie home. And Janie's like the matriarch of our family. She's the only family member I have really around. She sits at the head of the table for Christmas, Thanksgiving, all the kids' birthdays, all the great-grandkids' birthdays. And I'm driving her home in my son's band's minivan, in fact. And I said to her, Janie, you know what? I found out something really odd about 3 weeks ago. I found out that Mom and Dad weren't really my mom and dad. And if you can ever tell me anything, remember anything, would you please tell me? And she just turned to me in that moment like that. She said, Tom, I don't know how to tell you this. I'm sorry, and I hope you forgive me, but I'm your mother. Janie is Mohawk from Ganawagi. My father was Mohawk from Ganawagi. I joke. I thought for 53 fucking years that I was a big, puffy, sweaty Irish guy. But I'm a Mohawk man, and that is a great reward, knowing your identity. And it's something that most of us take for granted. But every room that I ever spoke in, every room that I've ever entered with this story, with my art or any concert, if I'm speaking, there are 2 or 3 people that come up and say, I have similar stories, who are also adopted. A gal, and I don't know if she's here today, she's 58, and she just found out recently that she was adopted. So this is a story that goes across the board. It's something that it resonates with so many households. So Tom, how does it feel to be an Indian? I come from a family of 5 generations of Mohawk ironworkers. You know those guys that built Pittsburgh and Detroit and New York City? I get nervous getting on a stepladder to change a light bulb. And I come from these mighty Skywalkers. When I went back to Ganawagi for the first time, and I met one of my 9 siblings for the first time, my sister Lynn, she had a statue there of this famous photograph of these guys eating their lunch, building Rockefeller Center. We all know that. I said, I thought that was kind of a cool thing to have. I said, wow, Lynn, you got that? That's really cool that you got that statue. Where'd you get that? She goes, oh, they gave it to me. 5th guy in is my great-grandfather, Joe Jocks. A lot of the guys eating their lunch in that girder are from Ganawagi. They're Mohawks, right? A lot of Newfoundlanders, too, also building steel, building North America into the sky. So, Tom, how does it feel to be an Indian? My great-uncle, Walter, he was one of the guys that built the Twin Towers, the World Trade Center. He also was one of the few guys that managed to be putting those antennas up into the sky. And in the family, way before I showed up, in the family, the Bova family, my father's family, it was always known as Uncle Walter's antenna that was on top of the World Trade Center. Whenever they drove in to New York, it was like, hey, there's Uncle Walter's antenna. And on 9/11, when those buildings came crumbling to the ground, he sat in front of his TV crying because of all those people dying, and he watched his antenna crash to the ground. So Tom, how does it feel to be a Mohawk? Also on 9/11, my brother Kyle was working steel down there. He was working on a building, and he and a bunch of Mohawks, 12 or 13 Mohawks, left the job, went down to ground zero, and volunteered to start pulling the mess apart, the burning hell that was in that hole. They went and did that. Because those were the guys that built those structures. They knew how to take them apart. And as he was down there working, he came across something that looked like a rocket ship. Sideways, it was giant. He couldn't figure out what it was at first, and as he looked at it, he realized he was looking at Uncle Walter's antenna. He went home, he cleansed himself with tobacco water, because he knew he was carrying the souls of all those people who died. So Tom, how does it feel to be a Mohawk? During the Oka crisis, I was sitting at home in Hamilton, 53 Barnesdale Boulevard, east end of Hamilton. I was watching the Oka crisis, watching it on the national news. Milton Nash at the time was talking about it on the news. It was in the Globe and Mail. It was on the radio. Blood was boiling, and I didn't know why. And at the same time, I was sitting listening to the news. My two brothers, they were sitting at their kitchen table, filling out their wills, and picking up weapons to go out and fight a war that they didn't think they were coming home from. A war because the Canadian Army sent more troops to fight the Mohawks in Ganawage than they did to Desert Storm. So Tom, how does it feel to be a Mohawk? I can't get there. I wasn't born into it. I didn't have my territory. When I started speaking out in public, other Indigenous people started talking back to me. They said, hey, you're just like me. You're a 60 scoop kid. I was stripped of my language, stripped of my colors, I was stripped of my territory. So the way I'm working back is actually part of the way that I'm working back, working into my own identity through this work here. All this art here. Every time that I take on a canvas, I'm Mohawk. I told this last night, I started painting. I told it to my friend Cam back there. I started painting in 1997, the second time I tried to stop drinking. I was a terrible, terrible drunk, and I wanted to get rid of that. But just as a footnote, I've been clean and sober now for 25 years, so that's the good news. The painting was a step away. I wanted to do something productive rather than being destructive. And as I started doing these paintings, I started to fall into this meditative state that I'd never felt before. I was still, my mind was still. I was alone with the canvas or the wood. And people started coming over. I was like, wasn't famous, but I was in a band that sold a lot of records. Women's Shelter come over to my house. They said, would you sign some CDs for us for our auction? And I said, yes, of course. I said, do you want a painting? And they took the painting and they auctioned it off. And then I gave one to the cancer ward at Jervinsky Hospital. I started giving them away. Then I was asked to do a show with Michael Stipe from REM and Daniel Lanois and Long John Baldry. And that was a hip little gallery called the Spin Gallery in Queen Street in Toronto. So I took my art in, and there was Michael Stipe's, and everybody's art was up. And I showed the curator my art. And he said, this is great. This is going to be great. How much do you charge for these? And I said, I don't know. I usually give them away. How's $500 sound? He goes, $500? I can't make any money selling paintings for $500. He said, I'm going to price them myself. And he went around the room and he started pricing $3,500, $4,000, $5,000, and all the paintings sold. So I kept painting. This creative path is one of the ways back for me. The book, the second book, the play, are all instruments that I'm trying to create to make conversation happen in this country. belief is that I'm not going to walk up to you and stick my finger in your chest and tell you anything. I'm going to let art do the work. My belief is that art is going to lead us into the future. Art has power that nothing else has for us. You know? Government? No. Churches? No. Corporations? No. We come to the altar of art to embrace us and to guide us. So this art that I've created here is hopefully something that will create a conversation that you'll walk away and talk about this a little bit. And hopefully those conversations start to turn into action. Now, my son made the big mistake of telling Sandra here that I had my guitar in the truck, so we're going to break up this reading with a little song. Do you mind that? Okay. So I used to come to London a lot, and I started as a kid, 15 or 16 years old. I used to get on the Grey Coach bus, and he used to leave me off at the bus terminal over here on Talbot. I used to walk up Talbot to a place called the Smales Pace at first, and then it was the Change of Pace. And inside these coffee houses back in the day were incredible. The greatest writers that I may have ever heard in my life, I got to see in my coffee house in Hamilton, in a room about the size of this table. I got to see Stan Rogers and Doug MacArthur and David Whiffen and Brent Titcomb and John Allen Cameron. And there was one guy that influenced me a lot, and his name was Willie P. Bennett, who lived here. Yeah. So I got to decide whether there's a story. The only part of the story that I'm missing here is that I actually, at 65, I can't, as they say, I can't remember what I walked into the kitchen to get, but I can remember the very first song that I ever played in London. So it wasn't a Willie song, so I'll do it for you anyway. The station was empty, the trains were all gone. I reached in my pocket, waited for dawn. The clock played drums, and I hummed the sax, and the wind whistled down. Railroad tracks, 3 for a quarter, 1 for a dime. I'll bet it's tomorrow on a Rocky Mountain time. I walked in a restaurant, something to do. The waitress held at me, so did the food. And the water tastes funny when you're far from your home. It's only the thirst, hunger to roam. And the clock played drums, and I hummed the sax, and the wind whistled down. Railroad tracks, 3 for a quarter, 1 for a dime. I bet it's tomorrow on Rocky Mountain time. Well, we built us a castle on Main Street and pretend that we're back on the farm. We'll hold on as long as we have to, then we'll twist off each other's arm. Christ, I'm so mixed up and lonely, I can't even make friends with my head. And I'm too young to be where I'm going, too old to go back. The station was empty, the trains were all gone. Reached in my pocket, waited for dawn. The clock played drums, and I hummed the sax, and the wind whistled there. Railroad tracks, 3 for a quarter, 1 for a dime, I'll bet it's more on a Rocky Mountain time. 3 for a quarter, 1 for a dime, I bet it's more on a Rocky Mountain time. For my brothers, am I one of them? I come from 2 worlds, 3 if you count my dreams. I was never sure about the one I was born into, pacified in slumber, and longing for the one I didn't know. I always knew that something was off. So it goes that I ended up not in the wrong world, just another one. A different one from the one my brothers lived in, but I regularly dreamed about it. Dreamed about them. I tried to feel them. I knew they were out there in a place that I could only get to in my dreams. Dreams that came in filled with chloroform and gasoline through the darkness, and dreams that took bites out of me while I lay there motionless and unable to defend myself. I was in solitary confinement and missing the womb. I needed a blanket that smelled like my mother just so I could calm my longing. I was, after all, a hit-and-run birth. My mother wasn't given a choice. I could feel her heart breaking as they took her from me from our arms. So I had to get to a place where my memories would be safe. I was determined to find my way back to that other world, the living mystery, so I kept looking for an opening, a passage back. Maybe it's out there with them, my brothers in this dream. My brothers, those wild men. They're bigger than me, younger, solid, with bodies that have worked for decades on the high steel across Manhattan, over and under the bridges that cross the Hudson River all the way up New York State into the valley. And I ask myself, am I one of them? Are we long riders or just acquainted with the same road somehow? I imagine us traveling together like outlaws on horseback or in cars, crisscrossing the border into America, back into Canada, escaping the laws of the white man's army, the U.S. Marshals, and the deadly RCMP. Together we abandon the insanity that pushes its way into our world. So we give ourselves up to the roads leading onto the fringes of humanity, only listening to the wild things, the animal spirits, and the ancestors who cue us up for the next ride. Our windows rolled down, breaking the seal of silence that we've created inside the car. We are Indians in blood. We don't have to speak to know what one another are thinking. We just listen to the wind. We ride on, but am I one of them? Am I one of them? Am I one of them? I stare out the window, holding my hand outside the speeding car into the air, watching my fingers crisscrossing the sunlight, shadowing my face and breaking out into white heat, yellow and orange, temporarily shocking my eyes, blinding me for a second before weaving back into its silent dance. But am I one of them? I sit in the back seat. I let them drive. I'm the passenger. I'm the older brother, the unknown member of the family. So there's days, that we have to fight for our life, fight to stay alive, just to keep our memories safe. But tonight, I sleep with them inside this dream. We'll ride overnight, my brothers and I, into places that we've never been to before, and places where we'll remember forever, places where we can't tell the difference between good and bad and obsession and longing. Who are the beasts? Who are the gods? I guess my mother already knew that I couldn't belong to her or anybody. I couldn't even belong to either of these 2 worlds. So I asked myself, am I one of them? Thank you. My mother, Janie, as soon as I found out that she wasn't my cousin, she was my mother, I got her out of her apartment and I got her set up in a condo. And we've worked on an impossible task of being mother and son. I live in a really nice neighborhood in Hamilton, and there is one. You know, my next door neighbor is an anesthesiologist. My other neighbor is a Bay Street lawyer. And across the street are all retired millionaires and multimillionaires, etc. Let's just say I'm the only guy that looks like this on the street, all right? You know, trying to become mother and son, we found, is a more difficult task than we could have ever imagined. First of all, we never imagined that we would be in this position. First of all, you know, my mother never expected to release this secret. She was held hostage. Her dreams, her expectations for her life, her thoughts, and her child were held back. She wasn't allowed. She wasn't allowed. She'd made a mistake. In 1958, she had had a relationship with an older man, married man, my father, Louis Bova, who had already he had 6 kids altogether with his wife, and I'm the 3rd child that they found outside of the marriage, and there's 2 more that they're expecting to find. So really, he was kind of a good-looking Mohawk with a busy dick. That would be the simplest way to say it. So my mother was brought to Hamilton. This is what I'm writing about now. I'm writing the story. I'm giving my mother a voice. The play that we produced that was in Hamilton that's starting the tour. It's going to the NAC in Ottawa and Thunder Bay and Vancouver and Montreal. We hope we can bring it to the Grand in London. Beautiful Scars is a play to give my mother the voice that she never had. It's another part of my art, part of reaching in and getting my identity and holding on to it is servicing the secret that my mother had to keep. She was brought to Hamilton after she got pregnant. I say that she hopped a fence out of town, but she was actually put on a train and sent to Bunny and George Wilson's house in Hamilton where she was to have me. And she did in St. Joseph's Hospital. And she remembers that I was born at about 10 after 8 in the morning because she looked up at the clock and saw the time. That's all she knew. They took me from her. She was an 18-year-old Indigenous girl. They took me from her body, wrapped me up, and took me out of the room so she never saw me. And she sat in a hospital room recovering for days, just telling people that she wanted her baby. And when she got feeling good enough, she was able to get out of her hospital bed and she wandered the hallways into the nursery, looking through the glass at all the babies, wondering which one was hers. She didn't know if I was a boy or a girl. And then I don't know, it's not that hard to trick an 18-year-old girl. She signed some papers and the Catholic Children's Aid took me where I was put in I don't know, some kind of orphanage, some kind of crib. And then I was brought to a family in Hamilton. Finally, my grandfather, John Lazar, said that baby's not growing up with strangers in a white home. And he came down in his car, to Hamilton to pick me up and take me home. I guess he was just going to put me on the dashboard and drive back to get back. It was the late 50s. You could do whatever you wanted, I guess. And at that time, Bunny and George took me and they raised me. So my work is really to give my mother a voice. And as the whole family has been getting to know my cousin Janie as their grandmother and me as her mother, we're starting to slowly get stories from her. So we produced this play and I brought her to the play and I was nervous as hell because I was revealing everything that she had told. I was putting up on the stage and actors were saying her words and she took it so well and the play ran for 3 weeks. And on the night before the play closed, the second to last show, before I was going to the theater, she called and she told me that the doctors had called and told her that she had stage 4 lung cancer. And the last almost 6 months now, my family, my son and my daughter, we've been taking care of her. So, you know what? I feel like I've done the right things, you know? Really, that's what, at this point in our lives, I'm looking around, everybody is either around my age, maybe a little older, I don't know. A few of you a little younger. You know, we're just trying to do the right thing now. We're trying not to have to apologize to our grandchildren and our children for the hard work that we didn't do to make this a better planet. And that's a big job. I was born into a racial no man's land created by colonialism. Some called my circumstances the 60s scoop, where Indigenous children were robbed from their families and placed in white homes off reserves. I roamed amongst the settlers undetected in my rape-colored skin, what is referred to these days as passing white features. The Mohawk had been wiped clean from me. I was wearing a disguise that got handed to me while I was too young and unaware to even know that I was wearing it. Decades before, my mother was sent to day residential school, where from the age of 6 or 7, she was asked to stand up every morning with the rest of the Mohawk children of Ganawage and take a good look at one another. Take a good, hard look around the room at one another. Because what you're looking at are the last Indians that this world is ever going to see. My mother actually believed that she was one of the last Indians. And she told us this story on her 80th birthday around the table with me, her son, my children, her grandchildren, and my daughter's children, great-grandchildren. That's 4 generations of Mohawks. So she was not the last Indian, she was a survivor. We're all survivors. Through her, we stand as victims of this country's greatest sin. Canada's attempt to wipe out the entire Indigenous population of this land is one of the grossest and most inhumane sagas in the history of the planet, and it continues today. We Indians, my mother, my ancestors, have been overcoming hatred at the hands of colonialism for, I don't know, 600-700 years. So tell me, what is reconciliation supposed to look like in this world now? Well, it looks like this. It looks like this right now, today. It looks like me having an opportunity to talk to all of you. And later, me giving you an opportunity to talk. So now let's create a world where we don't need the word reconciliation. Let us create a world where we don't have to apologize to our grandchildren for the hard work that we didn't do. That's my mandate. That's my work. That's my art. When I talked to some wonderful people out front here last night for the opening, the gal said, I feel so guilty. And it's one Mohawk guy's opinion. You don't have to feel guilty. The lies of this country have been hidden forever from us, from every generation. So let's just take the time as individuals to educate ourselves a little bit, to open up our hearts, to delete our Twitter apps, to turn off CNN, Fox News, even CBC News, and give ourselves an opportunity to think for ourselves. Give ourselves an opportunity to open up our hearts and show patience and love and respect and gratitude every day. And that means not fighting over a parking spot at the grocery store, okay? It means trying to understand one another. And that includes not having to use the word reconciliation. For me, that's the trick. It's conversation and listening to one another. So, you know what? You look like pretty good folks. I'm not telling you what to do, but fuck, go out and do it, will you? If you're not fed up with me, I'll read. I'm just supposed to be a reading, and so I'm gonna read you a little more. Recently, I was asked by the Downey brothers to come down and be interviewed for the Tragically Hip documentary that's on Amazon Prime. I keep saying it's on Crave, and Jake Gold, their manager, keeps messaging me saying, Amazon, you idiot. Stop saying Crave. So I showed up, and I thought I was just going to do a little piece, and I ended up in a lot of the movie. I sat with my friend Bruce McCullough from Kids in the Hall watching it at TIFF this year, and we were laughing, counting, who was on screen, who was on screen more. He was on screen actually a lot more. So I'm going to tell you this little story. It goes back to around the same time that I was running around with the band, the Florida Razors, here in London, playing. Let's just think about the places I played here. I played the Fire Hall. I played, much later, I played Call the Office. In fact, the night my daughter was born, I was on stage at Call the Office. So there you go. And what was the place that was owned by, it was on right here on Dundas Street. Everybody played there. What was it? Fryfogels. Yes. And the first time we played, this is how old I am. The first time we played Fryfogels, our opening act was Jim Carrey. So there you go. And he was way better than us. Rave on, Gord Downey. Gord was just a kid. Hell, we were all kids in 1984. I first met him when I answered a knock at my hotel room door at the Princess George Hotel in Kingston, and there he was with a couple of his high school buddies. We were there in the middle of the afternoon, drinking beer, playing cards, and that knock came to the hotel room door, and I opened it, standing out in the hallway with these really fresh-looking kids shuffling from one foot to the other. They told me they were fans of my band, the Florida Razors. They had actually bought my record. They came to see us at Dollar Bills. They also told me that they had a band too. I said, oh yeah? What's the name of your band? And one of them said, The Tragically Hip. I said, wow, damn, that is a good name. You should hold on to that for sure. I think I kept them out in the hallway because there was a card game going on in the room, money on the table, some local colors hanging around, and privacy was the utmost importance. So we talked through the doorway about music. They told me they played early Rolling Stones and did a few Monkees covers. So I asked them, I said, well, why don't you come down to the bar tonight and do a set before us, like half an hour or 45 minutes? And do you guys actually have enough songs to fill a set like that? They said, yeah, sure. And I closed the door and went back to the card game. That night, they all showed up. Some of them younger than the ones that showed up at my hotel room earlier that day. So I grabbed them and brought them downstairs into this damp basement we were using as a dressing room. Gave them a couple beers and smoked a joint and kept them out of sight because they were way underage. They all looked like Boy Scouts, except for one of them looked like a girl guide. And we let them use our amps and our drums, and we basically kept an eye out for them. 9 o'clock comes. They all go up on stage. They plug in, start playing this really old British invasion, what we would call today as album cuts. Songs that we never heard around the post-punk Canadian music scene, and they played them with some kind of awkward precision, like they had actually rehearsed. We never rehearsed. We did snort speed, but we never rehearsed. I was surprised these guys were actually sitting in such a great groove, and I can't remember all the songs they played, but there was a version of Baby Please Don't Go by Van Morrison and them. They did Off the Hook by the Rolling Stones. I mean, who does Off the Hook by the Rolling Stones? Nobody around the Hammer, nobody that I knew. It was all fresh. It wasn't old geezer style rock and roll because these were basically children with guitars playing ancient R&B. And the singer was another story. He wasn't like the gob-soaked, foul-mouthed corner street knuckleheads I ran into trying to prove something. He was a lot more exotic, kind of rare. Not your average cock-swinging punk frontman. I really loved the way he sang those songs. He loved singing those songs. And I thought he was brave to stand up there in a room full of boozy-faced Princess Street rounders and allow himself to be fully exposed the way he did. He didn't hide behind ego the way so many of us did. As Alex the Large would have said from A Clockwork Orange, It was like a great bird had flown into the room. I think that maybe he was just innocent. He was innocent then. To me, somehow, to my eyes, he managed to stay that way, because when I think of Gord Downey on that shitty little stage at the Toucan in 1984 in Kingston, and I think of him several summers ago standing on stage with me in Edmonton at the Interstellar Rodeo, I know that I'm looking at the same guy. I knew that I was looking at the same guy. A lot of us try to cover up who we are, but Gord, he acted out who he was for all of us to see. The cells didn't change. His innocence stayed intact, despite the years, the decades between those two performances. And still today, his bravery raves on. I remembered a bit like Mick Jagger from the Tammy Show, but he ended up as something that none of us had ever seen before. He was all his own creation. And it was compelling and honest. Like a live wire burned a hole into our imaginations and voiced what would be the soundtrack to generations of Canadians. All Canadians partied in kitchens and parking lots before hockey games. Songs blasted out of car windows and DJ booths everywhere. They were at their peak in 1994. Do you remember? They were all over the radio. So if you were to ask me who won the Grey Cup in 1994, I couldn't tell you. But if I was to take a guess, I'd say it was the Tragically Hip. September 17, for a girl I know it's Mother's Day. Her son's gonna leave, that's where he will stay. Wind on the weather vane, tearing blue eyes sailing me. As Falstaff sings a sorrowful phrase for a boy in fiddler's green. His tiny knotted heart, well, I guess it never worked so good. The timber tore apart and the water gorged the wood. You can hear his whispered prayer for minute masks that's always lean. The same wind that moves ahead moves a boy through fiddler's green. No, nothing changed anyway. No, nothing changed anyway. Or any time of the day, yeah. He doesn't know a soul, and there's nowhere that he's really been. He won't travel long alone, no, not in Fiddler's Green. You can hear her whispered prayer en masse, that's always lean. As Falstaff sings a sorrowful free, boy in fiddler's green, boy in fiddler's green. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Boy in fiddler's green. I just got to say that lurking at the back of the room is a guy who's one of the people who's responsible for putting that band into our hearts. A guy who was, I don't know if he was A&R, vice president of MCA. He was MCA. It's Cam Carpenter back there. He was. He was someone that I've known since 1984, the same year as that story about Gord Downie that tragically hit in Kingston. And Cam never signed me. So, but I still talk to him. And I still bum smokes off him. Anyways, listen, I would first of all like to thank you so much for showing up today. And you've enriched my life by having your faces here to be able to have someone to talk to. I'm very lonely, so I mean, having someone to talk to. I'm gonna finish off with a little acapella song. Part of my duties of creating this art that's here, including the residential exhibit. That's for my mother, and that's from the stories of my family of residential school. So please visit that. We built these desks with our families on the front of them. As you move forward in the rows, the families disappear. My great-grandfather, Peter Lazar, is also on that desk. He's got the headdress and regalia on. But creating this art is a true passion of mine. Writing these words that you'll hopefully read one day. It's a complete passion for me. I am striving to bring the Mohawk culture in my own way into the light. I'm striving to make the issues that are happening in this country and continue to happen in this country be translated into art so that we can hopefully enjoy some of this stuff. Also, look at the detail in this shit, man. I am truly out of my mind. But doing this art is not the only activity. My family, my son and daughter and myself got together. We started the very first Indigenous scholarship at McMaster University in Hamilton. And that is for any Indigenous child in Ontario who wants to further their education. My belief is that every Indigenous child becomes an engineer, a doctor, a lawyer, is a win against colonialism. And I am all about that shit. Okay, so that's one thing. That's one step. I'm also working to have trees planted on Indigenous territories around Ontario. That's a harder job right now. And it's funny, I told this story last night. I was asked to speak for the music conference that's here. I got arrested, I'm 65, and I got arrested 5 years ago at the age of 60, which is the most astonishing part of the story, by the way. So what happened was I was listening to my radio, CHML in Hamilton, and CHML had someone from City Council in Caledonia, Ontario, who said the town had been taken over by terrorists. And I thought, gotta be the Mohawks. And what had happened was Schuyler Williams and a group of Mohawks had squatted on the land. Not actually squatted, I'm sorry I said that. It's their land. they decided to sit on their land. But they were terrorists. So I went out to my Fortino's grocery store and I bought 30 of those, those roasted chickens that you walk into the store and you're immediately hungry. Now, I threw those in the back of my old Navigator, and then I got a bunch of vegetables and fruits and pies and orange juice and milk, all basically a giant grocery list for them. And then I drove out to the Six Nations with 30 roasted chickens in the back. And I took the back roads and I went to what had been renamed 1492 Landback Lane. That was a piece of land that some developers wanted to build homes on. And the reason why Schuyler Williams and those Mohawks and those warriors and those families moved onto that land was because in the War of 1812, the British Army enlisted the Mohawks to go and fight with them. And the Mohawks fought. They took lives, they lost a lot of lives, and as a reward, the British government gave them 6 miles each side of the Grand River to have love and hunt, to live in peace. And since the War of 1812, those 6 miles have become Caledonia, they become Paris, they become Brantford and Cayuga, and on and on and on. So Schuyler Williams said, not another inch, and he moved out there and decided they're stopping that. So I got out there to 1492 Landback Lane to see the terrorists, and I was unloading my truck, and I saw people cooking food on open fires, and I saw people having ceremonies, a bunch of children out playing lacrosse. Those were the terrorists that they were talking about on the radio. And I went back home, and about 5 days later, I had a knock on the door, and I opened the door, and it was 2 OPP officers. And the only thing that came into my mind was that I've been wanting to use this line for 2 or 3 decades that I heard Newman say on the Seinfeld show. And so I leaned against the frame of the door, and I looked at the cops, and I said, so what took you so long? They didn't think it was so funny. And that arrest, that was the first time I was ever arrested. So I'm ready to do that again. It cost me, had to pay a lawyer $5,000 to have them drop the charges or whatever, and I had to give another $3,000 to a charity. And
what was the charge?
The charge was probably trespassing or. I don't remember. I do remember how much I paid to get out of it. So I'm going to leave you with this song. I think that's everything I have to say for today. I'd like to, once again, thank you. Have a look. If you haven't seen the art, have a look at it. I'll just tell you a little bit that this piece, actually, I had to take down from my daughter's dining room. It's been sitting in there for about 2 years now. Her dining room is like, she lives in a tiny house too. It's like that whole wall of this painting. So that's from 2016 from a show I did. This one on the side is a self-portrait that I did because my Mohawk name is tehohåhake, which means 2 roads. Those are the 2 lives that I've lived, but strictly Mohawk in my heart. That was also done in 2016. Everything, these 3 were from a show I did earlier this year in Toronto. But the fish, the 5 paintings in the back room here, and the nuns were all done after we found out that my mother was dying and that I wasn't going to be traveling too much. My son and I, who's my assistant, went to the studio and we painted these for the Tap Gallery. And I'm so glad they did. I would like to thank Sandra and all of the staff here at the Tap Gallery for putting so much care and love into presenting this show, Mohawk Skywalkers and Chiefs. And not that I need to tell you your business, but London, you are so blessed to have these people in this space. It's like so important. I got a show coming up. Everybody here should get one of those. If you can just like, don't even wait for them to take one. Just put it on. Just walk around and make sure that everybody has one. Because I'm coming back to London, and what is the date on that?
November 26th.
Okay, and where am I?
Wolf.
The Wolf. Okay, so come on out. It'd be great to see you there. Okay. Anything else I need to tell you? I think that's about it. I got. They published a book of my art, which was really cool. That's an album of soundtrack music that my son and I did, which if you put it on and last 7 minutes without going to sleep, it'd be amazing. There should be a little disclaimer on that album that should say, do not operate heavy equipment while listening to this record. There's that, and on Monday, just because, you know what, I guess, you know, when I get to do this, it's kind of about me. On Monday, one of my big giant paintings like this is going into the McMichael Gallery. So where there's trouble coming at us, a broken promise from the tower. We don't stand for your flags and emblems. We're just claiming what's still ours. Yeah, there's trouble all around us. Police are on attack. When we get on the Grand River, oh mama, we won't look back. Well, they marched us to their churches, and they stoned us with their faith, took our belts and took our language, and left our dreams out to waste. Yeah, there's trouble all around us. Police are on attack. But when we get on the Grand River, oh mama, we won't look back. Holy land, just give it all back. Now sit down, sinner, you've got no claim. We will always rise above your laws in our mother's love and name. Yeah, there's trouble all around us. Police are on attack. But when we get on the Grand River, oh mama, we won't look back. Yeah, there's trouble all around us. Police are on attack. But when we get on the Grand River, oh mama, we won't look back. Yeah, when we get on the Grand River, oh mama, we won't look back. Bam. Thanks a lot, everyone. I gotta go have a smoke. Come on.